Oh. Oh, Biggs will like that. That's great. Crisp is some Discord setting that Joshua just screenshotted and told me because apparently, like, every little noise is being picked up by my microphone after it decided not to work 4 times after 4 disconnects. So that's who that is, new size. All right. Well, we're 5 past the hour, so let's do the thing. Welcome back, everyone, to another Midweek with Max. I'm Rick, obviously, joined by Joshua, our co-founder, Max Sanchez, as always. Couple quick community things at the top. I've been told that Hemi Heads has had a increase in difficulty, so that's really cool. That is Brother Gladdy's project, and it's really fun. Also, on the Hair server, there are still weekly games, and Alex told me that they are still awarding, like, hair prizes and whatnot, so if y'all haven't got involved with that, get involved with that. And without further ado, here's Max.
All right, awesome. Welcome, everyone, to another Midweek with Max. I'll go through a quick engineering update and then get to the AMA questions. And I would also like to mention we have a follow-up engineering, protocol engineering team AMA tomorrow at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern. So we have a bunch of questions from the last one we did, I think, 2 weeks ago. And so we'll be going through all of those questions we didn't get to last time. And then if people want to ask additional questions, we'll see how long each of them take, but hopefully we'll have time to get to everyone's questions. And then that's going to become probably a monthly feature. And we'll probably do a special edition once we get the BitVM white paper released to discuss that in more detail as well. So stay tuned for those. On the engineering side, we got a bunch of stuff merged in last week, some of it back-end infrastructure stuff, so replacement for proxyd in our RPC infrastructure, which we're doing some final testing on. We also got Testnet 4 support merged in, so we're going to be scheduling an upgrade to the Hemi testnet to move from Bitcoin's Testnet 3 network to Testnet 4, which should make testing Bitcoin-related, HVM-related things in Testnet a lot more stable and reflective of the actual mainnet experience of Bitcoin block timing, any dApps that are using HVM calls to look at Bitcoin, not having to worry about long reorgs and the difficulty bomb issues we have on Testnet 3. So stay tuned for that. We also are doing some work on the pop payouts, the new pop payouts algorithm. So that's been a little bit delayed because we had some stuff with partners we had to jump on and address with engineering, but we are going to be getting that in relatively soon. And with that, I think we'll go over to the AMA questions.
Sounds good. And as a follow-up to what you mentioned about the engineering AMA, we have a lot of questions already. Not to mention the ones we couldn't get to after already going like 40 minutes over last time. So, I guess buckle up. Because there's a lot of questions. All right. Well, it wouldn't be Midweek with Max if I didn't ask you this, Max. And I'm gonna actually ask it as opposed to having you read my mind. When Tokenomics, and are we still on track for that within 2 weeks? Tokenomics and VBK, which is now 1 week.
Yep, I think we will have Tokenomics announced before the end of the month. So I think we're still on track for that internally. A couple things still landing, but I think the end of the month is still a good estimate for Tokenomics to be released. And that will include all of the VBK announcements and Tokenomics as well.
That is excellent news. Would you say we've reached the ultra soon portion of the program? Or would you like to stick with the varies?
I think we are at ultra soon. A couple things. I wish I could share more details. Obviously, in the very near future, we should be able to share a lot more. But a couple major things landed this week, so I think let's go with ultra soon.
Oh, doctor.
We're getting there.
I love that. Okay, I think you know what my follow-up question is. It's when TGE.
Still TBD, very near future. We're still trying to hammer down a date with some third-party partners who have external dependencies. And there is some stuff that we have to finalize on our side in order to unblock them for various campaigns and such. So still trying to land an exact date. We will share it as soon as we can. That'll either come with tokenomics information or maybe shortly thereafter.
That is also excellent news. Excalibur, no, it's just one Ultra and Ultra soon. Just for the record. We're not at Ultra. We're at Ultra. All right. Will there be more campaigns on InfoFi projects like Kaido or Cookie, etc.?
I'd say yes. Not really my area of expertise to speak on those. I don't know if John has any comments on those, but we'll definitely continue doing social media campaigns. The exact form of that, I'm not super drilled into.
Yeah, I would chime in and just say it's highly likely that we'll continue to do stuff like that. Campaigns are dependent on what we're looking to get an outcome from. So I would expect more of them depending those outcomes in the future.
And the good news keeps on rolling. All right. Will Hemi support Babylon staked tokens for use in DeFi?
We already do have some of the Babylon LSTs supported. The name is getting a little confusing. I can't rattle them off the tip of my tongue, but a couple of the Babylon LSTs are definitely on Hemi in pretty significant amounts. I think there's a liquidity pool for one of them on one of the dexes. I don't know, John, if you have anything to add on the Babylon specific LST side.
You just restate that question. I want to make sure I understood properly.
Just where Babylon LSTs are being used in Hemi DeFi currently. I think we have a liquidity pool for two of them set up.
Yeah, there's just the liquidity pools that we have currently. I would keep an eye on like Spectra and other apps similar to that for possible utilization.
All right. Where are we? Okay. I'm guessing this is from Miracle. If it's not, I apologize, but I'm just going to assume this is a Miracle question, or at least he's thought about this. Do the Hemi hatchlings have any planned utility, or is it only intended to be a digital artifact from participating in Testnet?
We do definitely want to do something fun with it. We haven't decided what exactly that's going to be. We kind of have this idealized, eventual kind of loyalty incentives program that, goes beyond just points. It could take into account the various quote unquote official project NFTs, on-chain history of accounts, whether you were a participant in Testnet, whether you did, hot mining early on in Testnet, things like that could factor in. So still kind of amorphous as to what that design actually ends up looking like. But that's the overall kind of direction we'd eventually like to get to. And so there'd definitely be an NFT component in there. But what specifically the NFTs would get you is still definitely TBD.
All right. On the subject of NFTs, are there any more NFT marketplaces planning to launch on Hemi? And if so, when, without an H?
There's definitely at least one in the pipeline. I'll throw that one over to John as well, as I think he has slightly more insights on that side.
Yeah, I can't really give too much detail on that again because it's dependent on them on a lot of this, but it's definitely still something coming down the pipeline. I would expect something very, very soon. That's all I can say. Some of these things, like when it depends on third party teams, as always, it's really hard to like make a determination on when I can't push the buttons. So just waiting on a little bit from their side, but shouldn't be very long.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, here's one. Why did you name this project Hemi?
Good question. So the name originally, we went through quite the branding exercise back in the day. We eventually landed on Hemi, the idea being hemispheres. So Bitcoin and Ethereum as two hemispheres of the overall like DeFi globe, DeFi world. And so Hemi is short for hemispheres. We also have the Hemispheres Foundation, which is sort of the, foundation supporting the project, and then the project itself is the shortened version Hemi. It goes back to Bitcoin and Ethereum, how we're combining them together as two parts of a greater whole.
All right, thank you. And yeah, great question. Okay. What is the peak practical TPS of Hemi?
Right now, so TPS is sort of a confusing term. So TPS is transactions per second. There's a lot of different ways to measure TPS. So you can measure TPS as how many ETH transfers could you do that each use 21,000 gas, or you can measure it as how many Uniswap trades you can do, which use 300,000 or 400,000 gas. And so TPS is sort of a confusing way to look at it. The peak TPS on Hemi right now would be. Let me just do the math real quick. About 119 ETH transfers per second would be the max theoretical throughput. And then if you're talking about transactions, 5 times more complicated from a gas consumption perspective compared to ETH transfers, and divide that by a factor of 5. And then we will be increasing the total gas limit on Hemi in a future upgrade as well. So that'll probably go up by a factor of 2 to 3x in the next couple of months here.
All right. Where are we? Here we go. Will Hemi's network's activity have any negative impact on the BTC and ETH networks?
That's a good question. Short answer is no. Now, whenever you're building, to be really pedantic, whenever you're building things on top of other ecosystems, there's always things that could create counter incentives if you didn't think through them well or design them correctly. So, for example, looking at something like using Bitcoin for DA could potentially introduce MEV vulnerabilities on the Bitcoin DA side, and that's not the reason we chose not to use Bitcoin for DA. It is a helpful side effect of not using Bitcoin for DA is that we're not potentially introducing those unexpected, negative economic externalities on Bitcoin consensus. Ethereum, you still have theoretically the same potential issue where if you could reorg a portion of the Ethereum chain, you could alter what is or is not stored in Ethereum DA. So you could use that to do short reorgs of transactions, to do sandwich attacks or such on L2s, and that applies to any L2 that uses Ethereum for DA. So generally considered not to be a problem on the Ethereum side, but technically there's always risks like that with any sort of network that is introducing additional economic incentives on top of other systems. That being said, the way that we designed everything from proof of proof and super finality to the block derivation system to how HVM observes Bitcoin state, all of that was designed in a way that minimizes or has no, economic externalities applied to either network. So short answer, no. And in fact, in most cases, we're making both of those networks more secure. And we have, which I keep talking about the HBitVM white paper. It will be coming out soon, but there's a lot of good stuff in there for ways that Hemi sitting between the two networks can actually make zero knowledge proofs of each of the network's states more secure. So basically being able to use Ethereum proof of stake to keep Bitcoin proof of work in check, and then being able to use Bitcoin proof of work to keep Ethereum proof of stake in check. And so you can get this sort of self-referential feedback loop where if you want to ZK proof something about Bitcoin state, in order to manipulate that proof, you'd now need to compromise a large portion of Ethereum consensus power. Or if you wanted to forge a proof of Ethereum consensus state, you would now need to compromise a large portion of Bitcoin mining power. And so by combining the two networks together, kind of weaving their consensus together in this way, we actually make both networks more secure for zero knowledge applications. And that can be applied beyond just the Hemi network. So you can take secure zero knowledge proofs of Ethereum state powered by or protected by Bitcoin proof of work. And then you could go use those in an interoperability protocol that validates Ethereum state on Solana, for example. And so I'd say the overall net benefit of Hemi on both ecosystems is definitely very positive. And from a security perspective, that sort of weaving the two networks together creates a lot of solutions to existing security problems that either network could suffer from, especially in, again, zero knowledge proof contexts.
All right. Thank you for the explanation, sir. Before I go to the next one, I see a crowd question. Are there any updates for node license holders?
Not at the moment, but we are reviewing that internally. So we will probably have an announcement on what we're doing with node licenses within the next week or 2 weeks.
Which I believe is ultra soon, if my mathing is correct.
Yes, ultra soon.
Okay, perfect.
And JCV just added something to pop mining provides a set of guaranteed transactions that pay fees on the Bitcoin side. Yeah, so one of the things people worry about with like timestamping protocols is spamming other networks. The way POP's designed, it's only using a very minimal amount of Bitcoin space to secure potentially hundreds or thousands of chains eventually in the grand chain builder design. So the space that we're taking on Bitcoin is extremely minimal compared to what many other Bitcoin L2s are doing, especially if they're using Bitcoin for DA. But also we are providing that sort of minimum subsidy to the Bitcoin miners. So we're, as Bitcoin gets into tail emissions, we are helping to subsidize Bitcoin's security budget and keep Bitcoin mining more secure by providing additional incentives for Bitcoin miners. And we're also doing that on the Ethereum side too, with DA publications and then also state root publications and providing basically transaction volume that's subsidized by Hemi's security budget that works its way into Ethereum proof of stake incentives.
All right, thank you. I got one more from the crowd before we move on with the list. It's a non-Hemi hatchlings question from Miracle, which is a miracle. See what I did there? Will Hemi always remain 100% Bitcoin focused, or is there a possibility of natively supporting non-BTC assets in the future?
Good question. So right now Hemi's focused purely on Ethereum and Bitcoin. So assets from both of those ecosystems through their respective tunnels to the Hemi network, and in the future, especially post BitVM, being able to move Bitcoin securely through the Hemi network to Ethereum. Theoretically, you could also go the other direction and take Ethereum assets through Hemi and tokenize them on Bitcoin as a ERC20 or Rune or Ordinals NFT. Probably less interest in that. The much more interesting path is secure Bitcoin transfer through Hemi to the Ethereum ecosystem. But the focus right now is on just those two ecosystems. We do have interoperability protocols like Layer 0 deployed that do let people use dApps that interoperate across other L2s, other L1s in the ecosystem. So that's more in the dApp layer, but not the core protocol layer. In the future, though, the design, so the engineering to go from being an L2 to one L1 network to then being an L2 to two L2 networks, like we've done with Hemi with HVM, that's going from 1 to 2 is really hard. Going from 2 to 3 is a lot easier because a lot of the architecture pieces are already in place for that. So we could conceivably add other networks that are supported natively at the protocol level. More than likely, that would be done though through Chain Builder, and so you'd have different L3s in the Chain Builder ecosystem. So if you look at Hemi, one leg is standing on Ethereum, one leg standing on Bitcoin, and in the future you could have an L3 where one leg standing on Hemi, and then the other leg is standing on, say, Solana or Aptos or whatever. And so we could conceivably add additional protocols to the Hemi base layer, but that does add complexity, risk. It also means when any of those networks have a major upgrade, the Hemi L2 itself would have to upgrade, which is not ideal. And so more than likely the architecture in the future we'd use to bring other ecosystems in natively would be through that, having L3s that touch one other ecosystem and basically bring assets and information from that chain into Hemi through being an L3.
All right. So sorry, I fumbled my mute button there for a second. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. Are there any checklists or step-by-step things which we can do to make sure our grant proposal gets approved?
Just in general, explain what the grant is for very well, explain what the benefit is to the Hemi ecosystem, to Hemi's community. Any thoughts you have on, user incentives, that's always helpful to share. We will be putting up more information around the grant program soon-ish. There's other priorities, but we do want to get a more formal grant program out there and running. But for now, yeah, explain what the grant's for, what you're building or working on or want to do for the ecosystem, and link to, if it's something that you're developing, link to your GitHub, any sort of context you have for the project. If you've deployed in other chains, communicate that information. So the more info you can provide, the more likely your grant is to get approved. But we will have a more formal process for that in the relatively near future.
All right. Okay. A couple engineering questions. We do have the engineering AMA tomorrow at 11 a.m. EST, but what the hell? When is the HBitVM white paper releasing?
Soon. We keep adding things and making changes, all for the positive. The most recent one was we figured out a much more cost-effective and more secure way to prove Ethereum attestation data onto Bitcoin. And so there's some stuff we had to figure out with doing security analysis from a random manipulation perspective. And there was also some stuff we had to figure out on the Ethereum inactivity leak side, and some maximum worst case bounds for how that could be used to potentially forge states. And so making some final updates around that to the white paper. And then there's also, it's written in LaTeX, so there's a bunch of formatting stuff we're fighting. All easy stuff, but some final changes getting in. But hoping to have that out in the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks. A lot of stuff's finalizing and a lot of pieces are coming together, but there's still a little bit of churn going on with it.
All right. I'm gonna declare that as a very soon, not an ultra soon, just for safety.
Yeah. Probably tokenomics before HBitVM white paper, but we'll see.
All right. See, my math is working here. Oh boy. Here's a robust question, Max. How does the Bitcoin tunnel and the vaults work?
Good question. So anyone can spin up a vault as part of the Bitcoin tunnel system. Basically, you post up collateral in, I believe right now the supported assets are USDC, USDT, and ETH. And then you basically run a vault custodian on behalf of the protocol that can accept up to 70% of the value of that collateral in Bitcoin on behalf of the network. And then if you were to misbehave and steal the Bitcoin, then somebody could come in and liquidate your vault at a profit by bringing in additional Hemi BTC into the system and basically buying the collateral at I think it starts at an increased price of 5% above the current Oracle price of the asset. Now, in the future, we are actually making some changes to the Bitcoin tunnel system. Not quite sure when those are going to land, probably, the next 4 to 6 weeks. And so we are going to be changing a little bit about how the vault deposit flow works, because there is a problem with, so the current design is basically you just send Bitcoin to the custodianship address of the vault that you want to deposit to, and then include an op return in your transaction, which communicates what EVM address you want the Hemi BTC to be credited to. And the problem is some wallets impersonate the Unisat API, but they silently ignore the inclusion of the op return. And so that's, for a very small portion of users, that's created issues with being able to properly deposit to the tunnel system. So we're making an update where it's going to be a commit reveal system. So you will basically construct a tap script tree of the that has a spend path that the vault you want to deposit into can spend from, but you're not going to reveal that until the vault operator commits to accepting and sweeping your deposit. So it'll be a 2-phase commit system, and then that tap script tree would also have a redeem path that the user could use to claw back their funds if they're not swept within, still deciding on the total time, but something like 24 or 48 hours, to basically ensure that no matter what happens with vault deposits, either the user would be able to claw them back if the deposit was unsuccessful, or the vault operator would be able to sweep them once they've agreed to accept that deposit and ensure that there's sufficient collateral in the system. So there will be an update coming soon that changes that flow slightly, but that's the basic idea of the vault system. And then once we get BitVM implemented, then the current generation of the vault system would get deprecated. So they go into withdrawal only mode, meaning anyone could withdraw Bitcoin from those vaults, but new deposits would not be permitted. And then new deposits coming in would go to new BitVM vaults, where we have this basically setup ceremony for each of the BitVM vaults. So somebody indicates that they want to deposit a large amount of Bitcoin, then a bunch of decentralized users who want to participate, kind of like if you remember the Ethereum KZG ceremony. It's sort of like that, at least at a very, very high level, where you have tons of users participating, and as long as at least one of them is honest, the vault system's secure. And we can go into more details on that if people want to ask questions, either in the engineering AMA tomorrow or the special edition engineering AMA we'll do after we release the HBitVM white paper. But basically, there'd be this collaborative setup process with decentralized community members who'd be incentivized to participate in the Covenant emulation system to set up the all the Bitcoin transaction graph that's needed to enforce the BitVM zero knowledge verification of withdrawals in the future. And then once that's set up and we've proven that the vault was successfully set up as the protocol prescribes, then the user who initiated the deposit would send their deposit into the BitVM vault system, and then withdrawals from BitVM vaults have to empty the entire vault. So we're going to have a liquidity system built around that, where for people who are onboarding or offboarding smaller amounts of Bitcoin, there'd be liquidity providers who brought their Bitcoin in through depositing a large amount to a BitVM vault construction, and then they'd be able to provide liquidity to smaller users that are onboarding. You know, if you're onboarding 0.01 Bitcoin, you go through them, you'd send your Bitcoin to them. We'd have contracts on the Hemi network that use HVM to monitor those deposits. And then that would automatically transfer Hemi BTC from that liquidity provider to the sender. And then vice versa on the opposite side, you would burn Hemi BTC, or you'd send Hemi BTC to one of the liquidity providers, and then they would be responsible for sending you, for basically fronting Bitcoin liquidity on Bitcoin L1. And then we'd have HVM contracts that monitor that they successfully sent the Bitcoin to you, and if not, they would take the Hemi BTC, route it to a different liquidity provider, and make sure that that liquidity provider facilitated your withdrawal.
All right. Thank you, sir. Are there any plans to push DeFi on the Hemi network after TGE?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the primary goal, at least at the dApp layer. So we already have tons of DeFi protocols. I forgot the exact number, but I think we have 30 some, maybe we're over 40 at this point, dApp protocols. And we're continuing to talk to more teams about getting deployments. And one of the eventual things we want to do is have sort of one place you can go and see tons of the different things you can do on Hemi and engage with those very easily. So one of the, we have, I don't know how many DEXs right now, and we have DEX aggregators that make it easier to use, but it's tricky for a lot of users to go and find all the opportunities in those 40 plus dApps on Hemi. And so one of the things longer term we want to work on is having this sort of curated place where you can go to in the Hemi portal and see, okay, here's different yield opportunities and different protocols, different risk profiles, having systems that manage yield farming for you. One of our partner projects, Vesper, does basically exactly that, managing strategies for users. So you deposit, USDC into this strategy, or Hemi BTC into that strategy, and then it goes and automatically manages or optimizes yield around that to make it easier for users to take advantage of DeFi opportunities in the Hemi ecosystem. Again, not something that's going to be there tomorrow, but that's the long-term vision, is making that much more approachable and easy for users to explore, find those opportunities, and engage with them.
All right. We have so many questions coming in too. Okay, where am I? How many validators are managing the Bitcoin vaults for the tunnel?
Right now, it's just one vault we're running, but we are actively working to get some TVL providers to set up their own vaults and start decentralizing the system.
All right. What's the max TX Hemi can handle, and what's the TPS benchmark?
We already kind of answered this. So max TPS, assuming the simplest transaction right now is about 119. So that'd be 119 Ethereum, ETH transfers per second. For ERC20s, it'd probably be something like 20 to 30. We are going to be scaling that up in the future. So like I mentioned earlier, probably within the next, quarter or so, we'll be increasing that by a multiplier of 2 to 3x. But yeah, again, TPS is sort of a confusing metric because how many transactions per second? Well, it depends what type of transactions. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's more useful to look at total gas throughput of a network. But short answer, max theoretical TPS about 119.
All right. Where the hell am I? Okay, here's one. What is the difference between Hemi's proof of proof system and the VBK POP system?
Good question. So it's the same general idea. There are differences, just making POP work in a system where you're using another network for DA. So there's some things with fork resolution that had to change slightly based on that. With HBitVM, we are going to be making an update to proof of proof, kind of a POP 2.0, which completes the cycle. So when you look at POP on either Veriblock or now on the Hemi network, what it's doing is publishing state of one network to Bitcoin. So in the Hemi case, current Hemi keystones, basically those block headers, publishing those to Bitcoin. And then with the upgrade or as part of the whole HBitVM updates, is going to be then also publishing Ethereum consensus proofs to Bitcoin. And so the benefit of that, without getting too into the weeds, is essentially if you look at zero knowledge proofs, well, if you take another step back, if you look at Ethereum proof of stake, the way that it works is it makes some assumptions about how often nodes have to be online to stay in sync with the network. So all proof of stake protocols are vulnerable to something called nothing at stake attacks, or they have weak subjectivity. And so weak subjectivity basically means that in the proof of stake context, somebody with old keys that controlled consensus power at some time in the past could create an equally valid looking long reorg of the network, and to a new node that's bootstrapping on the network, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the actual public canonical chain and this alternate stake history that somebody with old stake weight manufactured privately. Now, with Ethereum, there's basically that's kept in check by when you have nodes synchronizing with the network. They are not going to accept an extremely long reorg. So as long as they stay connected to the network relatively frequently, what exactly that means depends on the validator churn and some other things. But as long as they stay connected relatively frequently, they're not offline for a year, then they are secure against those long-range reorgs. But in a zero-knowledge context, especially for BitVM constructions, BitVM basically you have to set up the vault, and then it only has the information that was available at the time the vault was set up. So like the current Ethereum state, current Bitcoin state, current Hemi state. And so there's no way to update that state. So there's not the analogy of that node staying in sync with the network, because no new information can be introduced into that BitVM vault after construction until it's finally withdrawn. And so one of the issues you have to solve is somebody who controls a portion of old Ethereum staking power could go and generate a alternate fake chain, and then they could use that to basically create an alternate fake Hemi chain, because their chain wouldn't have DA publications of Ethereum, and so the L2 derivation protocol based on that fake chain would basically run the Hemi protocol forward in default derivation mode, which basically means there's no data on the Hemi network except for the force included transactions that they put in their attacking chain. And so they could use that to create a fake forgery of Hemi state. But if we take proofs of Ethereum state, Ethereum consensus state, and publish those to Bitcoin, then we've closed that loop. And so it basically means that you can enforce rules for the validity of a certain state transition between these old known Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Hemi states to a new Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Hemi state that you're using to validate data for the BitVM vault withdrawal. And so if you're posting Ethereum attestations, you get two benefits. One, if somebody were to do a shorter range attack, and this could be against a BitVM protocol, it could be against a Ethereum validation contract on Solana that validates ZK proofs or whatever, then by posting Ethereum attestations to Bitcoin, you've made those attestations public. And so somebody who's creating a short reorg where they do have something at stake to lose, normally in a zero knowledge context, hence the zero knowledge part, they could construct a proof that an alternate valid Ethereum chain exists without revealing the attestation data that's required to slash them. And so by forcing the publication of the Ethereum attestations to Bitcoin, now if you were to create one of those private shorter range forks where you do have something at stake, you'd be revealing enough information for anyone to go and basically relay that false attestation data to the Ethereum network and slash you. And so that basically protects against these short range reorgs. But then in the case of the long range reorg, you would have to produce a equally valid Bitcoin fork historically in order to keep that, for short range attack, to keep that attestation data private. So that means you'd have to control 10, 20, whatever percent. It's a security parameter of the protocol for how much Bitcoin proof of work consensus you'd have to control. And then for long range reorgs, even though there's no slashability, because I think the current validator turn on Ethereum would take like 560 days for all of the active staking power to get replaced. And that's in a best case scenario. So you have the BitVM vault that can get withdrawn from for 6 years. That's a theoretical vulnerability. So in order to create a fake proof, they would have to control a large majority of Bitcoin proof of work power to create that zero knowledge proof of this fake Bitcoin chain that contains those attestations. So sorry, went off a bit off the plantation there, but short answer basically, right now, Hemi's proof of proofs very similar to Veriblock with some minor tweaks. This new version of proof of proof that publishes additional Ethereum attestation data to Bitcoin kind of closes the loop and makes all of the networks refer to each other in a way that's extremely hard to forge state against. And it leverages, if you're trying to do an attack on forging Ethereum state, then you have to control a bunch of Bitcoin mining power. If you wanted to do a forgery of HVM's view of Bitcoin state, then you need to control a lot of Ethereum staking power. So it basically keeps both protocols in check.
All right. Thank you for that.
Maybe that should have been saved for the engineering AMA, but that's...
We can ask it again if you want. I think that was a really in-depth...
I think we're good.
I think we're okay. Okay. What rollup type does Hemi use? ZK rollup? Optimistic? Pessimistic? I made that third one up, by the way. I'm just throwing you curveballs.
There is actually a construction you could call pessimistic.
Oh, hell.
It's like pessimistic zero knowledge, where you don't construct the zero knowledge proofs unless somebody challenges, and then you construct a zero knowledge proof responsively to that single state transition that was challenged. Right now, we're in optimistic rollup. Once we get BitVM done, as part of that, we'll need full ZK provability of the Hemi network. And so at that point, we'll also update the Ethereum settlement side to be a ZK rollup.
Awesome. My curveball really went stray on that one. I didn't see that coming. All right. How can I become a validator on Hemi?
So right now, there's no, if you're talking about being a sequencer on Hemi, we have not decentralized the sequencer yet. Once we do decentralize the sequencer, that's all going to flow through we'll probably come up with a better branding name, but what we're codenaming the converged staking system. So basically, you'll take Hemi tokens, you'll stake them in this converged staking system. That's going to be used for initially just governance, but over time, it's going to evolve to let users opt into different roles on the network. So for example, you could, if you had enough Hemi tokens staked, you could opt into being a sequencer, you could opt into being a data publisher to Ethereum, you could opt into participating in the BitVM vault setup ceremonies. In the future, there will also be using that stake as collateral for being a liquidity provider on the Bitcoin tunnel liquidity wrapper system, and probably some other things in the future, super longer term, doing shared sequencing, shared DA for chain builder for chains that want to use that. sort of out-of-the-box infrastructure for sequencing and DA. So all of that's going to flow through that converged staking system. So stake Hemi tokens once, and then as we decentralize different parts of the protocol that need people to operate as some form of validator, if you have a large enough position for that particular role. So, for example, you need much more staked Hemi to be, say, a publisher than you would need to be a sequencer, and you need an amount relative to the amount that you stake would relate to how much liquidity you can provide in the liquidity system. But basically, everything's going to flow. All of the activities that people could do to quote unquote validate for the Hemi network, do things that run the chain, keep it secure. All of those would flow through staking Hemi and then opting into each one of those different protocols that you want to participate in.
All right. Thank you, sir. Moving on to some... Oh, these are labeled as token questions, but they're not whens. So that's good. Do you think compromising on Deimos verification is unfair to real users and early adopters?
I think it's the opposite. By having Deimos verification, we're making sure that people who are legitimate, real unique users from Testnet get their rewards versus having those rewards get scooped up by civil attackers. I don't know, John, if you want to add anything else to that.
My understanding of the question was when they say compromising, it sounds like it's the opposite of what you just said. So I would need a little bit of clarification on the question. But assuming that does Deimos somehow interfere with early adopters, etc.? No, as Max has highlighted, probably the exact opposite. If anything, I would think that users proving their the fact that they're real and exist once in an ecosystem is kind of an important thing nowadays, especially just like a more recent one since we've talked last, the Caldera airdrop. Approximately 36%, 30 to 40% on average is the method. But that that ecosystem went and awarded users with points to tokens, and nearly 40% are known SIPLs, right? So these are just the known portions. These are the ones that on chain are documented. I would gander closer to 50%, right? And that's in a very similar environment to Hemi. So anytime that you're doing anything with points, rewards, drops, etc., you have to be very, staunch in the opinion that real users matter, and you want to make sure that you take care of them. When economics are at play, it's a little bit different because in theory, we don't mind if you're depositing to an LP pool with 10 wallets with $1 versus one wallet with $10. But, when testnet environments and in non-economics, it's something you have to be very careful for. I would just look at the history of kind of some other major incentives programs and how much value has been drained. Optimism over 65% historically, and that's literally like 22% of their current token supply. So that being there is a good thing. On the other side, if the question was tailored towards, is compromising on Deimos going to hurt those people? The short answer is we are not compromising on that. What we have said throughout will be the truth, and you need to verify twice in nearly all situations in order to be counted as such. Obviously, newer individuals that were not there for the first verification period can't do that. Therefore, they're kind of do second verification, and we are cool with that. But otherwise, compromising on it in any other way is something that we won't do. Even those that have had supposed wallet breaches, which is my new favorite magic fingers moment. My wallet's been breached. I'm sure there's some legitimate scenarios, but a good portion are people trying to get around that because they realize that they otherwise cannot fool it. So that one has been pretty interesting. So, I think it just goes to show that, there's always people within the ecosystem that are trying to, be bad actors in some way or another. And we want to make sure that the people that are there doing the right things from the beginning are getting, the most out of it. So that is my long-winded answer.
Yeah, we did get clarification. You're right on the compromising. I didn't pick up on that word when Rick asked it. Yeah, they were referring to when verification could still qualify for something. So like, I think John already covered this, but basically for users who came late and weren't able to do the first verification, we're making a bit of an exception for them, but also that's counterbalanced by the fact that they were earning in the points program for a much shorter period of time. So that sort
Yeah.
of self-balances.
Take this with a grain of salt. Me and Max spent hours on the phone. Actually, the past 2 work days, we spent hours on the phone, but we're kind of working through some of this stuff, talking about it out loud. But got a little bit of data overnight about this, and like it looks like on the high end, users that were not available for the first verification period, but were for the second verification period, on average earned like basically exactly what you would expect based on the amount of time. So like 1/6, 1/5 the amount of points. So, at the end of the day, it's going to be weighted by outcome. They didn't exist at that time. They weren't on Hemi at that time. And I would just say that there's always additional methods that we will take beyond what you see. So there's definitely going to be further audit investigation into kind of what's going on with addresses and everything, so that everything's always as fair as possible. So just keep that in mind.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
One last thing, and
Yes,
I will just to add on, I'm not aware of other networks that have gone to that length, actually. We talked about this with Max yesterday, but the methodology of having users prove that they have a Gmail account, a GitHub account, and that they have an Uber account, which is very, very common nowadays, and they believing it has a similar outcome. That's definitely not one-to-one with what we have in place. In the future, we could use even a blended model of attestation and biometric, but for right now, I can assure you that the biometric model is, very, very strong, and we, to the best of my knowledge, are the only ones to use that at a network level. So, pretty cool implementation for the people that did utilize it.
Yep, and I'll add on to that too. Just to clarify the difference between testnet and mainnet season. So testnet season, the anti-Sybil is really important because all of the tasking was essentially using, free. It was basically just people using their time, right? So that's where you really need a powerful anti-Sybil mechanism. And because of the timing of the close of the testnet incentive season and the verifications, everybody who was a legitimate participant in testnet had enough time to do both verifications. On mainnet, we're much more focused on the economics. Like John said, we don't really care if somebody deploys $1 of liquidity in 10 different EOAs or $10 of liquidity in one EOA. So there is still a Deimos verification component, but for mainnet, it's much more focused on the actual economic outcomes. Now, there were some non-economic components of the mainnet season. There was some social tasking. There was, I believe, a few other miscellaneous things that were non-economics. So for those things, Deimos verification is more important, and we are working on, like John said, we've been spending a lot of time working on some of those edge cases and details. But the Deimos and the 2 verifications, that's much more important for testnet. Mainnet, it's much more economics focused. And so if you're on mainnet, you should still be doing the Deimos verifications. You will end up with a better outcome from doing that. But we're also taking a much more economics focused approach for mainnet season points.
And one last addition, this is hopefully the last one. If you're a user that, and there's a few of these that I've seen, and I'm sure that logically there was more, but if you're a user that, just like anything else, you played around on testnet, and you disappeared after that, in between that couple month period that we had from testnet to mainnet, and then you came back around and you did some verification at some point, but didn't quite fit into both, stacks or verification periods. Then doing a second one would be helpful, because keep in mind that one of the major points of having more than one is that it needs to be similar throughout, right? So the longer period of time that you can go between verifications and them to match, is like the key to what's going on here, right? And that's why like people that try to game the system, they go from verification 1 to verification 2 and they forgot which person they used for that wallet, right? Which is the whole point. So with that being said, like if you are one of those edge cases that have kind of, they forgot about things or you were tied up elsewhere, if you can do more than one verification, which, have always, you get points for actually. And on top of that, there's other incentives of doing so. Let me put it that way. So trying to kind of go down the line and do more than one is key. And if you happen to only do one, and you're a newer user, that's fine. But just kind of point that out that if you have existed for a while, I would highly recommend doing that, because if it does come down to the wire and there's some sort of weight differential or anything else, we would be looking at things like that in order to make a differentiation.
All right. Sorry, I didn't know if you and Max are kind of ping-ponging there for a sec. I didn't know if Max had something else to add. So, sorry for the brief silence.
We're all good.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. If Hemi uses ETH for gas fees, then what's the actual role of the Hemi token in the ecosystem?
Already covered some of this earlier with the converged staking system. So the Hemi token is going to power, basically everything that we need users incentivized to do on behalf of the network to keep it running, make it secure. So from sequencing to being a data publisher to participating in governance to providing liquidity for the liquidity wrap around the Hemi BTC tunnel system, to in the future shared sequencing, shared DA for chain builder. All of that's going to be based around the Hemi token and staking the Hemi token. We are also going to make the Hemi token usable for gas on the network, and you'll get a discount when you use it. So the way that's going to be implemented is basically if you pay gas fees in ETH, you're going to get converted to Hemi tokens before being paid out to the sequencers who are collecting those fees. And if you pay with Hemi tokens, you would get a discount because basically there's not an extra fee being charged on that for the conversion. So right now, the only fee token on the Hemi network is ETH, but that will change in the future to the Hemi token being the preferred, cheaper way to transact on the Hemi network. But the main thing is really around all of the different moving pieces of the Hemi network: sequencing, shared DA, providing liquidity, publishing data, in the future, some component of decentralized ZK proving. All that's going to be powered by the Hemi token.
All right. How does Hemi plan to prevent Sybil attacks or bot farms from exploiting the system in future verification rounds?
I think we've pretty much already covered that with a sort of in-depth Deimos discussion.
I feel like you guys
basically
really
just,
went in hard on that. So.
Yeah, I think we probably already covered that, but just I'll give a quick summary. Basically, the Sybil protection is much more important for the testnet incentive season, which has already passed. Moving forward, incentives already they're 99.9% economics based in mainnet season 1. Going forward, that's going to continue to be the case. There will be instances where we do still need de-sibling for various things in the community that we want to do for unique individuals. And so for all those, we're going to continue to use Deimos. But again, most of the future incentives are going to continue to be based around economics, where civil protection is less important. But there are cases where you still need it, and we're going to continue using Deimos the way we've been doing so. As John mentioned, there are some additional analytics and stuff behind the scenes that for people who were able to or tried to game the Deimos system, we do have other ways to detect that beyond just the on-chain verification having completed.
And my one other comment would be that we will continue to use for a very broad term reputation, in various ways in order to ensure on-chain reputation, to ensure that users are interacting in the best way and get the best outcomes. So take of that what you will, and we're always looking to make things better and more enhanced, so that this is less friction, better outcomes.
All right, hell yeah. Where am I? Okay, that we kind of covered already. Um, are you looking for short-term boosts such as Kaido yapping? I believe we covered that, correct, gentlemen?
Yep, yeah, we'll probably continue to do social campaigns. It'll be a question for, I don't see him on here. Oh, Ryan Charleston. I don't know, Ryan, if you want to hop on and speak to any of the social campaigns, but
Ladies
hey,
and
Ryan, how's
gentlemen,
it going?
Ryan Charleston.
Hey, so what was the question about the campaign?
Oh, sorry. Are you looking for short-term boosts such as Kaido yapping or other social campaigns? We can just tack that on.
Yeah, so there is an ongoing campaign with Yap Market, and that should be ending here this week. Or at least the budget will be spent that was allocated $21,000 worth of Kaido. Um, but we are working on some other programs. And KOL marketing is going to be a continuous thing that we'll do, not just leading up to TP, but after. The nature of it and the types of KOLs we engage will you know, get refined over time in the different campaigns that we do. We're still kind of looking at cookie three and the cookie fund snap campaign, so that's something that we're still discussing and trying to figure out where that makes sense to launch that. That would be more geared towards community involvement, smaller KOLs and creators. And then we also have kind of separate programs for much larger KOLs that you'll probably start seeing roll out next week and the week after. So, um, yeah, it will be an ongoing thing. We're going to continue to look at ways that we can have creators of all sizes and types be able to participate and, and there be incentives for that.
All right, thank you, sir. Max, I got two more to close things out here. Um, I'm going to read it exactly as it was written. Max, are you a coding maniac?
No, we have much better coders on the team.
All right, so nothing maniacal.
Consensus protocol maniac, perhaps.
All right, we'll go with that. I expect memes to happen from that. All right, and to close things out, Max, who is your role model in the computer world?
That's a good question. Just because of recent work, Eric Brewer comes to mind, the guy behind the cap theorem. But probably if I was working on something else in 2 weeks, I'd have a different answer for that. But tons of amazing people who've contributed to computer science over the last 70 years. It's hard to choose a single name.
That's fair. I'm gonna go with Josh as mine.
There you go.
What the hell? All right. Well, that is the end of questions, and we are just about time anyway. So I just want to thank all our community mods, community helpers for everything you guys do. I want to thank the community for coming out today, as you always do. We've been doing this for like 9 months now. Borderline, we're almost at a year. That's crazy. Speaking of a year, Alex has brought up that Thursday is the 1 year since the testnet launched on Hemi, making it a little birthday. So that's awesome. Is there anything else? Nope, that's it for me. All right, so going to kick it over to Max for outros, but thank you all so much for coming by, and we'll see you tomorrow at the Engineering AMA. Same bat time, same bat channel. Actually, that's a lie. It'll be in a different channel, but there's an event for it, and there's also a question forum for it. So do what you do with Midweek and Max, but just, about engineering questions. No wins, please. And with that, kicking it over to Max for outros. Thank you all so much.
All right, awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us. Stay tuned for a lot of stuff coming out over the next couple weeks here as we get closer to TGE, Tokenomics, HBitVM white paper, tons of cool stuff coming out. So stay tuned for all that, and we will see you either on the Engineering AMA tomorrow or at Midweek with Max next week.
Absolutely. We'll see you ultra soon, if you will.
Ludicrously soon.
Ludicrously soon.
Bill's been trying to make that a thing.
I'm not punny
Thanks, everyone.
today.
Appreciate
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, Alex, I actually covered the community stuff at the beginning. And I got to jump to a meeting. But I will catch up with you guys shortly. Oh, yes. Oh, hold on. Okay. If you can make it quick, what do you got? We covered the games on the Here server. We covered the level ups for the difficulty of Hemi heads. I mentioned the birthday. Alex is going to have some surprises regarding that. Hemi Bro is waiting for his Rap God roll ultra soon. That's pretty funny. All right, but I really do got to jump to a meeting. We can find some time to wrap next week. I promise we'll come back to that because I know it's been like a couple weeks. So everyone, if you want to go for the Rap God roll, you got a week to prepare. Keep it clean, no F-bombs. And it can be anything. And if you play an instrument, that's cool too. Hermes did that. That was great. His mic kept cutting out, but it was a hell of a rendition. So, yeah, that's it. I'll see y'all ultra soon. Take care, peeps.